I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Yes. Let me bring Sudip up. Welcome everybody back to our Mix What I Like as we continue our Donut King project discussion series with Sudip Bhattacharya. The link to his work is in the show description. And yeah, folks, as you come on in, and Sudip, man, that was so just so folks are clear, that was a legendary night back in 2013 to celebrate my homeboys, he was having a wedding, or he had just gotten married, and they were having their wedding, I think wedding birthday celebrate, something like a wedding birthday thing. And he had been saying, he had been going to these wonderful parties for years, and even backing up a little bit more. In the late 90s is when I first got my DJ Spinner, who we just saw there, DJ Borbito, aka Cucumber Slice, combined double mixtape CD set called the Wonderful Mixtape. Wonderful, something like that. Stevie Wonder Wonderful. And it was a 2 CD compilation mixtape, brilliantly done by those two DJs, playing just all this music written by, performed by Stevie Wonder, I mean, it was just brilliant. And then Spinner started doing these wonderful parties all around wherever. And my buddy was saying for a while, he was saying, man, you got to come to these wonderful parties. They're amazing. Spinner, these beautiful, just the vibe, everything is wonderful. And I just would never go. And then for this, he said, look, you got to come to this. It's my birthday. It's my wedding. I can't remember. It's like, he was like, is this a special thing? Everybody's got to come out. And I said, fine. I was like, fine. And we go out. It's DJ Josh Sonic of the Soul Collector Collaborative collective here in DC. DJs was opening up. I mean, it was just a brilliant night and just a great DC night. And we were in there, we're hanging out. Spinner's just on his own. Josh Sonic did his thing. Spinner was just killing it. We're having this great time. And then out of nowhere, unannounced, without any expectation, just Stevie Wonder just walks in with his bodyguards. And we're like, what the and then that happened. And then he did something else later. And it was just perfect. It was just perfect. So Spinner is he just reposted that the other day, because this is, I think, the 25th anniversary of his wonderful parties. And I happened to be, so I was like, I was there. I was right there. I was in that crowd having one of the, my wife was there. Our friend, it was off the hook amazing the whole night. And then he ended with playing and it just felt like, the vibe, I mean, it just was it was perfect. It was just perfect. It was perfect. So salute to Spinner, salute to Stevie Wonder, salute to my homeboy, the 00 African community, and everybody else. And we laugh to this day about all those he invited that didn't show up that night. And a lot of people were mad as hell that they didn't show up. So, all right, the other thing real quick, and then I'll bring Sudip in for real, is that I got to get people to come to these Crushing Wheelchair screenings in DC and Baltimore. So please, QR code, whether you're in Baltimore or DC, please, on May 11th and 12th, please scan and sign up and go. If I'm somehow blocking the QR code in the top corner, all the way up here, will take you to the whole link tree to get all the information about the film, the trailer, the screenings nationwide. But now that they've especially asked me to host these DC and Baltimore screenings, I need people to come out. Don't leave me just out there like that. Please support the film. And plus, it's a really good film. It's an amazing film about houselessness, made by the houseless. It's powerful, very well done. So please, 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 please scan and check it out. And with that, Sudip, man, welcome. How you been? Good to see you again.
No, I'm good. Yeah, when you showed the video, I was watching it, and then I was like, I saw some people commenting. Then I was like, wait, is that Stevie Wonder? Because at the beginning I couldn't quite see, and then I leaned forward. I was like, you could recognize the voice a bit, and then I was like, is this? I was like, where would where did Jared go? I was like, really jealous about the fact that these things were happening back then.
Listen, you know, even back then I was reminded, like, it's been that many years since I was
Right.
resistant to leave the house.
Right, right,
And like, because I really didn't feel like going out. I was like, I don't feel like going out.
right.
But he was adamant. I had to go. Spinner is an amazing DJ, and like, I've been a fan of mixtapes and DJs like him for a long time. So
Right,
and the Soul Collectors who were spinning that night as well. Like, I'm a fan of the DJ. Like,
right,
I love DJs. So so it was exciting just for that. But that just blew the roof off. I mean,
right.
it was just crazy that he just showed up. And apparently it happens from time to time. I don't think
Hmm.
I get the idea that it's not really planned, even with Spinner,
Oh
although
wow.
I'm not sure. And he certainly does not announce it. So you don't know if you're gonna get, so. But even with all due respect, even without Stevie showing up, I would encourage people, if Spinner is still doing these, if you get a chance to see a wonderful party, you gotta go, because it's elite level DJing. I mean, master DJing. Like, it's not just I'm playing a playlist. I'm not using a Serato or whatever and just making everything automatic. It's elite level actual DJing. And you'll be exposed probably to Stevie Wonder in a way many of us are not. I mean, because you get a lot of the deep cuts, old cuts, remakes, other people's versions. I mean, it's an incredible experience, and then you never know. You never know when you might. And I couldn't believe it. And then we joked about it. He was like, the one time he was like, I've been going to these shows for years and never seen Stevie, and the one time your ass shows up. And I was like, I'm the magic half Negro. You know what I'm saying? You got to bring me around. Good things happen. So yeah. But truly amazing, truly amazing. Uh and I gotta say, politically and cinematically, crushing wheelchairs is an equivalent experience. So please, everybody, scan these codes and come on out. And um and then also check the channel. Chitty Matcha will be joining us live and direct on the 13th of this month. Talk about some of the great work that she does. So listen, Sudip, man, I don't know. So we are going to be talking about this very, very uh powerful book. I'll call it. I will say, I think it's but there is some silliness. Yes, Crushing Wheelchairs is the name of it, and it's relevant, powerfully relevant as a title, and I'll just leave it at that. But please check it out. Um, so I don't know exactly. Oh, by the way, folks, I got to say this as well. Sorry, Sudip, forgive me. I forgot one other thing. Um, listen, I just got word of this the other day, and somebody that I want to just pay tribute to just passed away the other day. Chris Simpson died, and you can see that I've reposted a classic interview that we did around his, at the time, recently passed mentor, Ed Herman, who was often, even before Chomsky lost some credibility with the Epstein stuff, Herman often got overshadowed, despite being in many ways the maybe even the intellectual leader of that duo in terms of manufacturing consent and his media analysis and criticism. But Chris Simpson was, he died on March 26th. Apparently, he was a communications scholar at American University. And I literally, as I got word of it the other day, we had just literally wrapped up my semester using his book, Science of Coercion, about the history of the field of mass communication in my sociology and mass comm class. And so I salute to him, rest in peace. He was a brilliant scholar, and his analysis of the field of mass comm, I think, is essential. to understanding the field and our media environment. And then personally, because he had been at the University of Maryland in the School of Journalism before I got there, when I got there and ran into all kinds of problems politically, intellectually, etc., there were people who put me on. And I've talked about this elsewhere before, the late Dr. Kathy McAdams, Maureen Beasley. It's like these whites, and it's odd, these Southern white women who had suffered so much as women in the field of journalism had become almost radicalized at the end of their lives in many ways. And so when people like me and Dr. Burroughs and our brother Saswat and others showed up there, they formed a sort of an odd support network for left of center black and brown thinkers. And they put me on to Chris Simpson. They said, you should check his work. You know, you're on the similar path. His work is precedes you and is brilliant. And we met. We interviewed a lot when I was doing radio and pirate radio. We did this interview a couple years ago, and linked in that show description is the interview we did before that. He was in my Academics and Cars series, where we drove around and talked about the history of propaganda and all that kind of stuff. And he was just a supportive dude and brilliant. And he did a lot of work with students at American University, supporting the Black students there and their journalistic and critical thinking efforts. Anyway, I don't pretend to have been in his inner circle, but he was certainly a brilliant scholar, somebody I refer to this day, literally as of yesterday. Just want to just raise him up and encourage people to check his work. And yeah, Science of Coercion is essential. He also wrote a number of other things that we end up talking about in those videos that folks should check out. So, all right. Sudip, how would you like, we got a couple things to get to. I thought, I don't know. There's I don't know. How would you like to proceed? And then I've been talking a lot so far. Let me let you jump in here.
I mean, I don't think so, but I don't. It depends. I mean, this is your show. I mean, I think you mentioned the video with Amiri Baraka and Grace Lee Boggs. Do you want to roll with that first to give some intro to that,
All right,
and then we can go into the book?
So first of all, while I agree that technically, yes, this is my platform, et cetera, and so forth, but this is our meeting and our discussion.
Sure. Yeah.
So with all, I'm fine to do that. And but I would, let me just get this one other thing out of the way, because this is one of the, so if I can just remind folks, this is Sudip and I having our ongoing public meetings that we decide to make public and have fun with about our Donut King project. The playlist will be linked. I think it may already be in the show description, so people can go back and see. And we're tentatively referring to that because it's through our initial look at the Donut King story and this idea and this repeatedly imposed narrative that somehow Asians have figured out how to come to this country, engage in capitalism and business, and do things that Black people can't do. So in wanting to challenge these histories and narratives, we started this project. The Donut King book and documentary that came out some years ago had been referenced by a number of Black people in terms of, look, this is another example of what Asians can do when they took over the donut industry. Why can't we do this and this, that, and the third? And we're like, all right, there's so many different problems with all of this. So this is what and in the run up to today, just in my buying power, Google alert, I got a hit again. So I just want to because it's so silly.
Yeah. Okay,
but it's like a good precursor to why I think we're doing this and why this book that you suggested we read is super important. Beyond the Spotlight: Why Asian Americans Are the Growth Engine of the U.S. Mainstream.
We did it.
You did it. Congrats.
We did it.
And it's I'm proud of that. You should be. This is an achievement.
Yeah, this is great. We've made it.
And forgive me because I've also forgotten. I do tend to ignore all of these months, but they're saying that this is we're reminded because this is came out on May 4th, that this is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And as the month begins, it's important to remember, as this marketing outlet wants to point out, that brands often treat this moment as a seasonal spotlight rather than what it actually represents, a signal of where culture, consumption, and growth are heading. So again, Asians have now, I think, caught up to Black people with a $1.8 trillion buying power as reported by Nielsen. And I'll just point out for the record, as I continue to, that there is no link here. There
Yeah,
is no,
yeah,
but if we go back, as I've done on a number of other occasions, to what I'm
yeah.
sure is the Nielsen report that they're pointing to, all Nielsen does is point to the Selig Center, and all Selig does is go back to some estimates and projections based on surveys about a handful of Asians and how they spend their money. So ultimately it is ultimately about the same thing. Here they have and because this was archived and I couldn't I couldn't get to the
Oh,
exact McKinsey report that they're linking to, but I'm sure it's the same one I've been.
that's a trusted place too. They do a lot of great work. They put forward a lot of like really good analysis. So when I'm reading this as you are, I don't find. Also, it's good to know the Pacific Islander group is just shoved in with us, even though they're not Asian really, and they don't want to be. So it's fine.
So that's, I mean, again, that's part of what this project we're doing is supposed to represent, right? Because
Right.
right, I didn't even think about that.
Like Native Hawaiians, all because because I teach a class on Asian American politics, and I just wrapped up one, at least teaching it. Now I have to grade things, but I always tell my kids we had 1 week discussing Hawaiian colonialism, and I said like we talked about how bizarre, how it reinforces a myth that the European wants anyway, because like the Hawaiian native themselves is just a migrant technically, right? So
Mm,
anyone else coming in is just, it's part like the same thing what they do with slavery narratives. Oh well, everyone had slavery, so we just,
right.
Europeans we just partook, like we just had to. So it's like, well, it's different. First of all, like
We had no
yeah, we just had
choice.
we just, Portuguese. You know how they're like, oh, I want peri peri chicken, but I also just want to like own human beings and like forever. So it's like I don't understand. So it's the same thing with Native Hawaiians. Like we can't. We found an opportunity, we being the Europeans, to say, oh, y'all Asian too. So you also migrate across the strait through Alaska or to the boats. It's like that was thousands of years ago. So it's very interesting. I always love that part where Pacific Islanders just get thrown under and they're just like, dog, we're actually native. So what are we talking about?
No, I mean that's a great point, because I stopped at the as we've been talking about, just the whole Asian. There's no need to differentiate because there's really no difference between Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, and whomever else. They're just all Asians. They all have the exact same experience, the exact same history, and the exact same relationship to one another, even when they're here. So if why not throw in one
Can
more
I?
group of randomly brown
Right.
people?
Well, I definitely think that's obviously them doing that whole narrative thing. But also, I just want to add, they did this stuff too. I think I mentioned this a while back doing one of the interviews we did. Maybe it was for the article I did. That was Saturday's Renee. But I think if you remember the Atlanta spa shootings that happened a few years ago with the Asian
Mhm.
women being killed, most of them, and the white guy was like, I just had to because, they're just a temptation, which is very important to the story. He just viewed them as sexual objects that he can't. The only way to deal with an Asian woman, according to them, is to either, assault them or kill them because it's a temptation. That's the brutal reality, and that's what he did. But one of the things, other than the sheriff saying,
Mm,
"Oh, he just had a bad day," was
mm.
also there was, I think, some articles, and I put it into a piece I wrote that were then highlighting the importance of, I think it was MSNBC or CNBC, very liberally, how we need to again highlight Asian American business owners or businesses, small business. It was a
Oh
very
yeah.
similar list. It was so disgusting. Like
It's
I
and
joked at
this
the
is
time, but it was weird.
no, this I mean, this is the point I'm ultimately getting at here, that they're doing this something similar. Now, I think it is, again, the histories aren't the same, so it's weaponized and I think the impact is slightly different when targeting Black audiences, but it's the same approach. It's we want to we Asians in this case are valuable to the extent that they float the economy. And because again, it's the same point. The buying power that's referenced here is its ability to benefit the broader economy and those who own it. That's why Nielsen is involved with with this. Selig Center again says as their core purpose is to help the businesses of Georgia market their goods better. And then of course McKinsey is literally world renowned for helping set policy for corporations and colonial ruling elite. So that's their interest. And then just very quickly, I just noted here at the end that Cheryl Lee, who wrote this, is the president of the Asian American Advertising Federation, 3AF, and executive media director of Intertrend. And I'm just now getting this, by the way, because this is how this is maybe I do have some sort of, I don't know, but I'm just now getting that 3AF is the Asian American Advertising.
I just got that
AAA.
too. Sorry about the same.
No,
deal.
but you haven't read this multiple times and highlighted it and everything. So like you're excused. I've reread this thing multiple times and I'm just now getting it. So that's why it took me months to get 2 F's with Frandy French. But anyway, but I did look into this just quickly, who this Intertrend is, and we are intermediaries, international, interrupters, interdisciplinary, and award-winning, result-driven Asian American advertising agency. And then if you just scroll to the bottom, like this is all their partners. It's like this is again the point. And then I love the Choctaw Casino and Restaurant.
Nice.
So it's like all the sort of standard corporate banking,
pharmaceuticals,
telecom, pharmaceutical. It's that's what is served by these reports. It is not. So if you note here, none of these are, some grassroots radical political organization. None of it is meant to benefit communities and help them to understand their economic relationship, et cetera, and so forth.
Wasn't Nestle in some sort of hot water for child labor exploitation?
Probably. Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah. But, I mean, they could all be, but I'm just saying, I think I saw a case several years ago when I remember there was a Indian American lawyer. He was a progressive, but he had defended Nestle, I believe, in that case. And then do you know the show with it's called Politically Reactive, Kamu Al-Bell with Hari Kondabolu? I think
I'm familiar with Bell at least.
Yeah. I've seen some of your commentary on him. I used to like his show. Me and my girlfriend would watch shows together, the podcast they had. But after a while, it grew a little bit weird because they had this guy on to talk about anti-Trump stuff, but I think he was the lawyer at the same time for Nestle. So it was a very interesting exposition and demonstration of like a certain kind of politicking where you could sort of focus heavily on him being against Trump technically, but then at the same time, I'm just saying this, I don't remember exactly, but maybe I'm wrong, but him, I think if I remember correctly, at the same time defending the company. I got into a weird thing with Kamal Bell on the internet because he when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Yeah, that was really embarrassing. But he I think a bunch of people were doing like deep think pieces about it, and some of it included Putin. And I think him and another guy who's a black guy who's very liberal too. I think Eli Mistel, the guy who does legal stuff, but he's a nice guy. But I think they were writing think pieces or think tweets about how this represents the authoritarian whatever. And I just said somewhere, it's just a slap. Like, I don't know. Like, this seems like a very personalized, like, how is this being connected to Putin? And then he did some sort of a gif at me of like laughing or something. I'm like, you have so many thousands of people following you. I'm nobody. Why did you? So it was like very weird. I showed my girlfriend about it.
Putin was responsible for Will Smith slapping Chris Rock.
It was like the whole era. It was like everything had to be connected. Wow. It was like the meme of the guy connecting everything with the tape, but they're connecting all the wrong things. And to your point, the Asian American thing, really quickly, I'm fine with actually I actually don't like when people, not saying you, but other Asians like they focus too much on also disintegrating that term, like wanting to like, we need to decoupled from, there's Indian, and then within that group there's more diversity. At a certain
Right,
point
right,
I
right,
get
right,
annoyed because I'm like,
right,
all right, do you
right,
understand what the history of the term was meant to be? It was always meant to be a uniting faction. When the Asian American identity was created, it was in 68.
right.
It was intentionally to build with, yes, maybe more Japanese and Chinese here, but with Vietnam explicitly. So they knew that. And also, to be honest with you, I'm kind of done with the two extremes, like the reductivist take where everybody just needs to be together without any difference. But then there's the other stream among Asians who are like, we just gotta like not talk about the group. I'm like, there's still a group. Like with that
No, that's
mini
real. You're
article,
right. Yeah,
the one group, but it's always focused on the wrong things that connect us. So that's the thing. Like most Asians still have common experiences, but
yeah.
they're always focused on the consumer experience. That's diabolical. That's what makes it so bothersome to me. It's like of all the things you connect to the consumer experience, which is not unique. Everybody is a consumer in a stupid place. So it's so ironic, but that's the thing I get also. Like I deal with my students and I always try to tell them like, I want you to identify the differences because it's too much to expect like all of us are the same, but try to be careful about how far you go with disintegrating the term itself. Because at a certain point, you're just going to be like, Indian American. I mean, India is huge. So many types of
Right,
Indians. So at
right.
certain points, they're going to be like, well, I don't feel connected to that guy and that guy. And I grew up in a very Indian place. So everybody was in their little corner sometimes. And all of us generationally were mixing it up. But sometimes it was like annoying because some people were like, I'm just Punjabi or I'm Gujarati. And I'm like, bro, like, I don't. And I was like, I don't care right now. Like, we just like, like, can you just like, we like, and then it's like, and then it also gets into weird caste stuff too, like casteist
Mm.
politics. Like, I'm a Brahmin, unfortunately, but we are one of the few Brahmin types who eat a lot of meat, like fish and lamb and goat and all that good stuff. We don't eat pork, even as Hindus, because there's also an interesting thing about cultural mixture. So in West Bengal, there's a lot of Muslim folks, and there is a cultural identification with a common like diet. So I one time asked my uncle when I was in Kolkata while he was like smoking inside the apartment. And I was next to him, and he he was a truck driver. Our family is very like pulled apart with different experiences, but he would just my parents would leave me with him. He was a great guy, and I would watch NBA games in the middle of the morning, and he'd just be like, "Oh wow, LeBron, he's amazing." And he would just like smoke. And then he would eat all the Oreos and say, "Do you want Oreos for breakfast?" It's like, "Sure." But then I remember one time I just asked him out of curiosity. It's like, "Do you eat pork?" And he's like, he was utterly disgusted. And he said the same thing that a lot of Muslims do, which is like, it's filthy. So there's a lot of interesting blending too that happens that people kind of miss. Not saying what you're saying, it's just that I get this visceral response when other people are like, we got to go even more discreet. Like, what does it mean to even be Asian? Like, I don't know, man. Like, it means lots of things, but it's still like with Grace Lee Boggs's point and James, there's a certain level of just understanding, like they're talking about the dialectical and the contradictions, but for the focus of building to a new kind of unity or something. So it's like
So,
very
so first of all, your point is well taken, and yeah, I'm sometimes overly focused on how the colonizer is viewing everybody, and in that regard, that was my
no,
point,
no,
that they're just lumping everybody. But you're making a very good point, and you're right. Like at a certain point, how I keep saying, like my version of it is whatever version of identity any one of us has, that's just the doorway into this revolution.
right.
And we have to just, we can recognize that, appreciate that, and at times dive in and delve into that. But at a certain point, I am getting to the point where it's enough already, and we have to fight. At the same time, though, and we'll get to this, I found myself struggling with what Grace was saying
Yeah.
on a number of occasions in this book, like, you know, and her very harsh approach to even what I consider to be appropriate revolutionary identity politics. And so we can, you know,
Yeah.
but I will also say, as I got this clip loaded up, actually, before I do that, if I can, I'm sorry again. Let me address, because I don't want to lose this and try to come back later to deal with it. So thank you very much. I am Black Mal.
Ooh.
I'm assuming you were going to say I am black male and ran out of characters. I don't know. But thank you very much for the super chat. However, you're doing this here. Mr. Claude Anderson has spoken on this many times. He says the Asian community uses their collective capital to get their political agendas pushed forward. Any truth to that, Dr. Ball? So I'm not going to get into it too much now, and I don't have anything fresh in my mind. It's been a while. I have a number of videos here and discussions elsewhere where I've been critical of Dr. Anderson and some of the limitations of his approach and what I think he does get wrong economically. So I don't remember exactly what he has said, but he has mistakenly made the point in terms of Black people regarding buying power. So I think he might be doing the same thing with Asians, and then I think he does what other people do too often, which is part of what this project Sudip and I has as its foundation. He oversimplifies that, again, grouped Asian community and what it has and has not been able to do, and he takes out some of this, as is the case with many people who make these comparisons. He leaves out the specifics that are specific to Asians or to Jews or to other whites, and cannot be applied to Black communities, and then uses that to then almost chastise Black people who are supposed to be his community and target audience for not doing what these other communities have done. And I have a big problem with that. So
could I just add a thing real quick?
Please, yeah.
I saw that comment. I think it's great, first of all, because it's like we need those sort of questions being asked, and plus it comes with money, so that's great. But to be honest, my perspective and what we're doing is not to suggest that there isn't a group of Asians who get what they want based on money. Like, we've talked about this. Asian Americans, right, in terms of stats and history, have technically, yes, been positioned better off than African Americans. And in many ways, segments of Latinx folks too, especially Mexicans, Mexican Americans and such. So this project was never to go to another extreme of suggesting there's no such thing as a privileged group of Asians, right? But the purpose of all this is to say, you can, like, to your point about how Jews and Asians and certain other groups get labeled as successful stories and missing the context of how. It's the same thing with the Donut King to a degree, and other folks. Like, there is a wave of Asians who were sponsored to come here, who were anti-communist, so there's a political edge to it, and in some cases they were Christian. If you look at some of the Vietnamese Americans who've arrived here in mostly the West Coast, in the East Coast, when they came through, a lot of them were Buddhist, and they got really effed up in Philadelphia by the racist whites who were there. It's like a whole different class dynamic in the 80s versus the late 60s and 70s. But there were a wave of Asians who were compradors who came here, and even if they came with very little because they had to run away allegedly, they still got sponsored. They still got seen differently. You know, in comparison to African Americans, many instances where I've been around whites where they have said things like, you know, they think they're saying something nice, but in the end, it's quite anti-Black and just everything else, when they're like, you know, suggesting that these people really want to be here. They really love the ethics of it. And like in the Donut King book, there's a scene where the Donut King himself gets what's the word, leveled up by one of his white friends. Like his journey is very fast. He gets leveled up by a white friend to meet the owner of an actual donut chain, who then says, I trust you, I'll let you do your own little thing. That is not a story you'll hear from someone who's, say, an African American, because their story is about migrating from the South into Cali. And so it's a different paradigm. So this whole thing is not about dismissing that, but it's about adding a layer of nuance that I do think ironically also misses out on what Asian Americans as a whole have, because you also have instances of Asian Americans who have to deal with those kind of Asians too, right? Like where I grew up is very Asian heavy. A lot of store owners are Asian. A lot of the workers are Hispanic or Asian. And there you go. It's not a story of just complete success. It's a story of some kissing butt and getting leverage and using the anti-Blackness of society to their benefit, and others who just are just missed from these paradigms completely. So that's, I just wanted to add that really quickly about the Donut King himself.
I appreciate it, and it goes even to this point being raised here, where still the real AD says, I'm always going to push back with you, Dr. Ball, on that point. How can it not be effective for a group of people to use their resources to control their community and the politics in their community? And what I keep saying is, if I welcome the pushback, but I hope at some point you are, in all this constant engagement, you're suggesting that you would hear and or read what I've actually said, which is never that people shouldn't use what they have access to benefit themselves. It is that what is often done, as we were just saying here regarding Claude Anderson, is that there's a misrepresentation of what is possible in the potential for Black or other communities to do with what those resources are. In other words, there's an over representation and a misrepresentation of the amount of resources and what can be done with those resources. That's ultimately my point here. It's not to suggest that people should abandon pooling what they have access to benefit themselves. I am saying that what people think is the possibility here is not. And that's the point that I keep trying to raise.
And there's a ceiling to it. I think the point is like
yeah. And then Nestle, you were just, by the way, you were
oh yeah,
like
I saw
Nestle
that
was
Neil Katyal.
implicated.
Someone mentioned that. Yeah. So he defended them, and then he was on the show. So it was very funny. I was like, I did say to myself, "Well, what a brave Indian American." And then I was like, "What the f is happening with this progressive show? You're a monster." That's what I thought. Like, I think I mentioned it in one of their Instagrams or like their Facebook, like or Twitter. I was like, I don't know if you should have him on, and they never responded. I stopped listening to the show after a while. I was like, this is crazy. But just to your point too about no one is arguing that there isn't stages, which is a part of the book. There's stages to this. So at some point you're going to have to confront capital itself. Like I've been around anarchists, white, black, brown, mostly white, and some of them are very, very obsessed with controlling resource and like buying homes using our money. However, I don't even know how that would work because we don't have enough yet. But there's always a tendency where I would say like, well, I agree with you. Like, I don't want to be under control of someone I don't know, like a landlord who's faceless. But you really think the capitalists are just going to, like, you think the issue is that we didn't build enough? Like, we always build, and then they beat the shit out of us because we don't have the other things, like armed self-defense or another stage of development, political development. There's always a sense of, yeah, it's like when the Vietnamese were winning, as was described in the book, which I love, and I do want to talk about the contradictions, though, because there's so many times I was like, oh my God, I do not agree with this. But when she was talking about Ho Chi Minh, it took years and years for them to really build their final like armed struggle. But when they would arm and win territory, they would build community resources there to win over people. It wasn't just assassinating Frenchmen, but you see but the qualification is important. It's not just about controlling your resource because they're going to come after your resource. If they see something gleaming, they're not into the idea of a competition. They kill each other. I mean, not technically, but the imperialist capitalists, they go after each other. They're just like Warner Brothers, Comcast. So they're not going to be satisfied if me or you are just like building our little strange compound with like a couple of goats or something. Like they're not, even if it gets better, they're just going to come at it and say, no, thanks. You know, you're gone. This is what they did with Move in Philly. They dropped a freaking bomb on them.
And I think, didn't we just pass the anniversary of that?
I think so. I think that's why it came to mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but yeah, no, and that has been a huge issue for me in these debates all the time. It's not just an issue of philosophically, do I agree with controlling resources? It is how do you control them and how do you use them and what potentially can be done with them? And that's what I keep saying is misrepresented. And then one last thing before we do, I can't help it. Detroit Showtime. I feel like we had this issue with you on a previous episode, so I'll remind you and others to go back to particularly the episode that Sudip and I did around Asian triangulation. No one is denying Asians having a track record of anti-blackness in this country. That's not the point here, and nobody is saying that is denying any hostilities there. The point, though, is when these comparisons, because then in that same breath, people will then say Asians hate black people, Jews hate black people, but black people should do what Asians and Jews have done. So that's the contradiction, as I would oversimplify it, that we're trying to address here. So but again, please go back and check all of the work that Sudip and I have been doing already, and you'll see that many of those issues have been addressed and will likely come up again. So, all right. Now that said, the clip I do have more or less pulled up when in 2007. So this book that we're talking about here, Revolution and Evolution in the 20th Century, was published in 1974 and then reissued by Monthly Review Press in 2008. And in 2007, the clip that we're about to play aired on Democracy Now, where Grace Lee Boggs was invited to talk. And I was thinking that I wish back then, when I was a regular viewer of Democracy Now and watched this in its original run, I wish that I had been reading Grace's work, to be honest, which I had not been. I would have better understood, I think, her argument then, and I would have maybe reacted to what we saw in this clip differently. So we're going to pick up mid-interview, and I'll put the link in the show description so people can see the whole thing. But it ends up being where she and Amiri Baraka have this back and forth that was promised to be followed up on, and unfortunately never was. But anything else you want to say about this before I pull it up?
No, I think we could run with it. It's a lot of stuff that they're kind of doing.
Okay, so we'll pick it up here, and then yeah.
Understand 67, not only in terms of white power versus black power, or black power versus white power, but in terms of the transition that the world and the United States and Detroit in particular is undergoing. I think it's within that context that we can get beyond the criminalization, the sort of martial lawization of our society at the present time.
Grace Lee Boggs, in Newark, 26 people were killed in the rebellion. 24 of them African American, then a fire captain and a policeman. In Detroit, 43 people were killed. How did that happen? Were there indictments? There were none in Newark.
There were not indictments. And the question of, I mean, the question, I think what I hear, Amy, is that we think that the question of justice is the question of whether we indict or whether we prosecute. And I think that we're reaching another stage where we have to see the question of justice in terms of how do we rebuild our communities, how do we restore our people, how do we as Americans, this terrible crisis that we're in now, not only in our cities but across the world, how do we become human beings? How do we take another leap in our evolution as human beings?
You are a Chinese American woman. Your father ran a Chinese restaurant not far from here in Times Square in New York. And you graduated in 1935, got your PhD in 1940 from Bryn Mawr. How did you end up getting involved with Black radical politics?
Well, the story, I think folks have to understand that. First of all, in 1940, when I got my PhD, Chinese Americans couldn't even get jobs in department stores. They would come right out, say, Macy's would come right out and say, we don't hire Orientals. And it was under those circumstances when the question of race was so primary in this country that I was looking for a job, not thinking it was ridiculous to think I might get one at a university, began to find a way to make links with the Black movement, especially through the March on Washington movement, which was led by A. Philip Randolph in 1941. I decided I wanted to make movement politics my life at that time. And it's been my life for the last 65 years.
1941. I don't think people know about a March on Washington, or certainly don't know who A. Philip Randolph is.
I know. And really, I think, and maybe it's important to know, because up to 1941 and the March on Washington movement, which was led by A. Philip Randolph, who was the founder of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, Blacks were not able to get the kinds of jobs that would provide them with any security, with any seniority. The defense plants, I mean, the Depression in 1940 had ended for white workers because the war production was booming, but not for Black workers. And it was under those circumstances that the movement of Blacks to get jobs, which took the form of the challenge of the projection of a March on Washington, which scared Franklin D. Roosevelt to death. I'm not quite, I mean, he was forced to issue Executive Order 8802, that we began to have a black working class. And then very soon, because the technology of World War II was introduced to the planet, that future began to close down for black young people. And I think it's necessary to understand that the first rebellion took place in Watts in 1965, in August actually, 1965, shortly after the signing of the the Voting Rights Bill, which came out of Selma. And Martin, a few days after that, the Watts erupted, and Martin Luther King went to Watts, found that the kids had no idea what he had been doing, and they were very proud that they had erupted and forced people to recognize that they existed. And in response to that, King moved to Chicago in 1966 to listen to these young people. And he came to the conclusion at the end of his life that what we needed was to listen to them and understand that the age of just expanding economically and technologically had come to an end, or we needed to bring it to an end and understand how it had created and had destroyed community and denied participation to so many people. And so we were at a watershed in human history, and that's where we are today. And I think that's the context in which we have to look at what happened in '67.
I'd like to ask you in relationship to when you say that the young people were proud of the fact that they forced recognition of themselves, the role of the media, of the news media, in terms of the Kerner Commission, obviously after Detroit and Newark, said that they blamed the media for one, failing to at all deal with racism in American society, but also found instances where reporters actually fabricated violent events during the rebellions to make things look even worse than what they were. Your analysis of the media's impact on public consciousness.
But they were pretty bad. I think if not to acknowledge that they were pretty bad, I'm just thinking, for example, Mack Avenue up the street from where I live. Before the rebellion, we had a whole lot of small stores, drug stores, hardware stores, small restaurants. Now it's a complete wasteland. And many sections of the city were looted and burned. I mean, it was a very difficult and painful period. But out of the pain, what we got out of the pain was a kind of black political power within the cities. But the blacks who came to power in the cities had the same sort of institutions to administer. So it wasn't a question of changing from white to black, but changing the whole infrastructure. Because the rebellions represented this cry from young people to be of use in some way, to have a society in which instead of being outsiders, they were part and parcel of belonging and creating and being of use.
Amiri, what has changed in these 40 years in terms of consciousness and in terms of what the country has learned from that period?
Well, actually, in some ways, we've gone full cycle, but up to another level. I mean, we went from the kind of blatant brutalization of white supremacy and racism. We then organized ourselves and elected 2 black mayors. None of my children, for instance, have ever grown under white people ruling in Newark. They don't even know what that is, you understand? And so we can be proud of that. But at the same time, after we had our 2 domestic kind of mayors who compromised relentlessly with corporate power, you understand? Now we've come full circle and
let me ask you a question, Amir. Do you think that we have challenged and criticized and evaluated black power sufficiently?
Have we? No, but I've been doing it for,
When are we going to do it?
Well, I've been doing it for almost 37 years. I mean, having 2 black mayors there, Sharp James and Ken Gibson, I was probably their most relentless critic all the time. But now we have somebody who doesn't compromise with corporate power, but who represents it. So that's the difference.
Well, do you think it's a question of changing an individual, you know, so from changing from Gibson
an individual who's willing to change the system. You have to get an individual who's willing to actually struggle with the system to change it. As long as you have people who
I mean, what do we mean by struggling with the system? When are we going to be
to make substantive changes, to make infrastructure changes?
When are we going to understand that we have to create new infrastructures?
Yeah, but you can only do that through people. You see,
no, but you're not going to do it from people at the top. We're going to do it from people
you have
at the
to
bottom.
mobilize the whole community. But what I'm saying is the people at the top became accommodated to being in power and not changing.
Maybe what we've done, yes. But you see, we've put so much emphasis on taking over the power structure, and we became prisoners of it. Because
I'm going to have to leave it there, but we're going to continue the discussion after the show. And
But they never did. I was so disappointed in that. I waited. I don't want to get into a whole sidetrack around my issues with democracy now, but this was one of the key moments in what I thought was the overall decline of that program, especially if you've been familiar with it from its inception in the 90s. Samari Marksman and others in their early involvement. So anyway, it never happened. It was super disappointing. And then the next year, I found myself in my own debate with over Barack Obama. So it was kind of wild to reflect on all of this and learn more about from Grace's perspective then and now. But Sudip, let me invite your first thoughts on that exchange, and then how you see it relating to what she was actually writing and at the time republishing in this book.
Well, it's interesting because in Revolution Evolution, I do want to say like Grace Lee Boggs is like a hero of mine for a while, for the last 10, 15 years, just because she is one of the few people who took solidarity and analysis to a real limit, like having, going from the perspective, like the fact that she got a PhD as an Asian American woman in the 30s is crazy. Like when I tell my students, I have to like just let them know, like that is wild, like the kind of extreme racism that she probably faced. And I think she did it in philosophy. So philosophy nowadays is not diverse when it comes to gender, I don't think. So back then, being quote unquote an Oriental woman, and doing it at Bryn Mawr, even though it's a liberal school, like it's crazy. Like it just shows a lot of chutzpah, to take a term from growing up in New York. But then she went to Chicago, lived, like she said, in a rat infested place herself. And then she saw Black folks there rising up. And then she said, I need to do that. So I just want to say, like, for me, I don't know, there's always a level of her character that's quite part of that era in some ways, because you can see it in other women of that time, a little bit like, I don't say rougher, but more like, I just need to do shit right now, even with some of the, like Sada, and like, this is it, I'm analyzing, I'm not going to slow down. But with some of also, so I just want to identify that as a big part of how I feel about her. But there's some interesting things in the exchange that are in the book. Like, for one, in the book, she is committed to the idea of having ethics with revolution, not just replacing one with the other. She keeps harping on that really importantly, which I think is true. And obviously in the book, so the book goes through, if you don't mind, I just want to give a quick summary really quickly. The book is a setup, like in a good way, not like talking about like it sets up their final 2-3 chapters about what a revolution in America would look like, and the dialectics of revolution. But they set it up with at least 4 chapters, each chapter dedicated to one of the major revolutions. So they go through Russia, China, Vietnam, and then Guinea, Bissau, which is a great, that one is amazing to me. The fact that the Portuguese, like by the time the Portuguese had their own coup that got them democracy, Guinea-Bissau was already like 2/3 liberated. So it just showed like we don't even need to wait for them to get their act in order. And then finally, Vietnam, which she also connects with China as the two main forces to learn from. But what's interesting too is that I think Baraka, in my view, had a little bit of something I could understand of what she was trying to say. Like in Grace Lee But I think what's different between her and Baraka's concept of the individual, sort of, is that with her, she was identifying the individual along with the party, along with the vanguard, along with the mass line, like lots of other variables to create more consciousness among the people. Because in the book, the book also is a real good discussion about what is a revolution. Obviously, how do you create it, and then what is the role of the intellectual or leader? And that's why she highlights Mao so much, because Mao, she argues, understood the limits of even so-called revolutions in Russia, even, or within China. That's why they did the Cultural Revolution. But with Baraka, what I found so fascinating is also with him and his own journey politically, because I believe he went from like several different Pan-Africanisms, and then finally he landed with Marxist-Leninism too, and then like he's kind of drifted in a different direction after that. But in that clip, it was kind of, like he wasn't totally. It's fascinating because there were certain kind of discussions I would have liked to see get honed in, because I felt like they were just getting to that in that second or third question when Grace Lee said, "What do you mean by struggle? By the individual struggling?" Because in some ways they do overlap. Because I think with Grace Lee, she does say in her book with James and Grace, that there are individuals who tend to lead the way and who have the analysis. And they even talk about the petty bourgeois having a role because they're educated. So they're very, very forward. But I think with Baraka, he was kind of just saying something about like, you need to input, because he's referencing Cory Booker, which he's not wrong about. Cory Booker is a different kind of vessel, right? But I think that thing would have been interesting for me, like you said, to see a second half to that. Because what does it mean by, like, are they saying the same thing? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, it was also that I was frustrated that as a conversation that at the time when I thought Democracy Now! was a legit, or should have been a legit sort of CNN for a real left. I thought this is exactly the kind of conversations they should be hosting. They have access to these superstar luminaries. It should be like routine discussions and debates and deep engagement. It shouldn't have been relegated to a passing segment. Because yeah, especially reading this, it does seem pretty clear that was the key difference, that Grace wanted to redesign the structures themselves, and Baraka thought that the way to do that was to take control of the existing structure and then reframe it. And especially looking back at this point, and this ultimately was where he and I disagreed in terms of Obama. But especially looking back with hindsight, I'm like, I think what Grace was arguing should definitely be more explored and debated, even where, as you mentioned, there are some contradictions and some things that I may just need to struggle with. Maybe I'm just not evolved enough to get, but she pushed a couple buttons in here that for me, again, I'm not even at the point where I would say she's wrong. I'm just acknowledging that I struggle with them. So, but definitely appreciate the summary and the breakdown that you offered. My quick highlights, just very quickly, are that she wants new humanity and new infrastructures. What I did appreciate is she is aggressive in her condemnation of religion, and at one point, because it just happens that we've been kind of covering this on this channel here a little bit lately. I wrote on what did I write here on page 84? Because she says these myths are forms of fatalism, and we can come back to what those myths are. But she says religion is the fatalism of the uneducated. And I was like, that's.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
I admit, I was like, that sounds harsh, but that's. And then I wrote in the margins, I scribbled that like Marx did the opiate line, then Lenin had the more aggressive, it is the opium, and then Boggs is like, nah, it is the fatalism of the uneducated. That damn. But
Fanon said a bit of that too, like in his idea, like how the colonized itself is enveloped in a violent culture, so some of it has to come out some way. So it comes out in some aggressive forms of dancing, as he says, like real, like, getting that out. And then also he said in some forms of religion too. Obviously his connection's a bit more complex, but I actually underlined the same thing. I was like, wow, this is very, very blunt. She and James are very blunt. Like there are moments where you do feel like it's older, because other things they mentioned was the new left. But I don't want to cut you off. Yeah, I know you have other.
No, that was it. That was it.
Oh,
I was just outlining my few. Oh, and then the last one, yeah, she's against nationalisms and Pan-Africanism and third worldism, and I that's where I really struggle.
Yeah,
and then she's also where I thought I would struggle, but I think less so as maybe I'm getting older. But she like the theme of the book is a sort of revolutionary patience, not a liberal patience,
right,
but a revolutionary patience, which I
Right.
think is important to distinguish as well. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the thing that is was really like I forgot I read this book earlier, because my partner was like, I think you read that book, and I went through and I had like faint things, so I'm glad we reread it. But
I do that too sometimes. You find books.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't even know I had this book, and then I got all my notes in it and shit, like
Like, who
scribbles
was
and
right? And I'm asking like, who was this person?
who was this person?
Yeah.
They're underlining exactly what I would have underlined, and they're writing in the notes exactly what I would have written in the. Oh shit, it's me.
I know, it's like crazy because I must have read this for my dissertation, so I'm like, yeah, I definitely did, I guess. But I was like looking at, it's like a different pen, and I'm like, who is this person? Because there is some things that I've changed since the last several years even. So, but like the thing about her and James is so interesting is that they are obviously students of revolution. They're students of precision. They very much valorize the academic work of defining things and understanding things, which I think is very useful. Where I find a contradictions too, and I first want to go more into her positive side and respectfully disagree, because there are some like the Pan-Africanism critique and the third worldist critique exists though in the same pages as valorizing the second wave feminist movement, which is fine. But it was just strange to have both those movements and then pick on the third. But and also with the third worldist critique is a major part of her book. As fatal as she is with fatalism and religion, she and her husband are quite blunt with U.S. empire. And this is the prediction they made that was quite correct, because there are some predictions that weren't totally correct in my view. Their prediction about the U.S. empire being the vanguard of just everything going wrong in the world. I think at one moment they said the world can go poof because of us, because of our empire. Totally. So they have a worldview that could be described sort of as third worldist, because they are literally saying the United States has to have its own revolution for the world to survive. So they're saying that repeatedly, but then they condemn the third worldist movement for having these sort of, I guess to them, their issue is like very aesthetic. And it's clear that they are part of this middle region of old and new left. And they're having like auntie and uncle conversation, because they used to have revolutionaries go through their home. They used to have people hang out with them. So I'm pretty sure a lot of it was like personal in the best way, but it felt like a conversation with your dad or your revolutionary aunt being like, listen, back in the day, you need to think about this. But you guys are going so into sex or drugs, like random stuff. It's like, okay. But that's where I found some of the contradiction, because they did say all the things that the third worldists would say, because they are arguing that we should have this fealty and relationship with groups of people in other places. And I also just want to highlight, there's my favorite chapter, by the way, is the People's War in Vietnam, just because I'm just fascinated by the fact that the Vietnamese did, like, it just heightens the fact that the Vietnamese did something that was quite incredible. Fighting against the French, the Vichy French, who I didn't realize called the Japanese to help them.
Yeah, man. There's a lot of little tidbits in this. So, but quickly though, but what I understood what she's saying, the way, I'm not saying I agree, but what I understood her to be saying is that because you're right, it's like they have this very third world analysis, but she's saying the third world, the actual third world, has to be known as such and then be the leaders of its own colonial movement. We here in the United States, wanting to call ourselves colonized and part of the third world, need to abandon that and leave that to them to do. And that's where I was like, yeah. And then in that same line, she's also saying we have to abandon our struggle around political prisoners. And that's where I was like, I can't. On page 259, she says, but in spreading these political myths of people inside the United States being
Oh, right.
world of
Mhm.
political prisoners, of Pan-Africanism as viable solutions for Afro-Americans, and of male chauvinism. They are more representative of bourgeois thought than they are of socialist thought. And I was like, damn, how, oh my God. So I was like, the scientific socialist Pan-Africanism of Kwame Ture is the same as whatever else she's critiquing. I was like,
I
and
have a feeling of who they're referencing
struggle
to.
around political prisoners is akin
Yeah.
to male chauvinism, or like listed in the same list of failures as male chauvinism. And I was like, I can't.
It's
Because meanwhile,
interesting.
she doesn't say a word about Mumia or
Right.
Leonard or anybody who would have been locked up while she's writing this. I was or
They were, yeah.
reviewing.
Right,
Leonard would have been Mumia during the reprint. But yeah, anyway, yeah.
Well, that's it. I'm excited because in that same page I circled this. She mentions this is the joy of reading this text, because it has so many great. Because I want to again go back to like the great stuff about it first, but I did want to say like this paragraph that I have on 259 as well contains the best parts of this book, and then the parts that we struggle with. So if you don't mind, like at part of 259, she begins with saying, they begin, James and Grace.
Right.
That is
right.
why so many non-white groups inside the United States expound the nonsense. So I put like exclamation points, like crazy, that they are third world people fighting to liberate themselves when this is actually the revolutionary duty. So I see what you mean. I just, because we'll go into the idea, like I do believe there are colonized conditions and colonized connections. And I think they were missing that weirdly. And they also kind of suggested that. They said they always had a caveat, rightly so, for Native people. They said, except for Native people, because they still exist in concentration camps. But I'm like, well, how do you overlook that as a very big part of these movements? Because AIM was around still. I mean, I know they were like fighting their last breath in some sense, but they were still around doing that. But then they said that is why so many play around with Pan-Africanism and other escapist ideas. I don't agree. While continuing to live in the citadel of capital. So this is a great question about people of color. So this is the thing I also like about the book, though, even though it's troublesome, is because it troubles who they're talking about. They're not talking about white people. They're talking about us. And I do like the idea of like getting deeper into that. But then they said, enjoying the fruits of U.S. imperialist exploitation. That is why they evade facing the opportunist and reactionary tendency. And I think you'd love this. Within their own interest groups, such as Black capitalism.
I got this.
Yeah.
So like I skipped ahead, but I got that all marked up. Like I got that part. I was like, yeah, we're on it.
Yeah. So that's the point. Like that's and that's like later in the book. Like you have these bars throughout, but you have these like very conditional bars because you're stuck with like ideas you're like humming with and understanding, and then it comes in with like these jabs to your gut a bit, like being like, well, you're not colonized. I'm like, I mean, okay, or you're not exactly facing the, because one of the things I do want to talk about is a little bit of their buying into the idea of abundance in the United States. They keep referencing the fact. So I actually disagree with the third worldist. There's a part of the third worldist conception where they suggest that, you know, the working class in America has its material interests met, which is what they keep arguing. I don't think that's true. I actually do think in certain communities here, and a lot of communities here, especially since the time they wrote this, conditions are pretty bad. Like really bad. Like not even the reservations, like off the reservation too. But we've seen that. And I think that was something that weirdly, they kind of echoed a third worldist position. That's the funny thing about this book. It's like they were echoing a position that I think the third worldist would agree with, that I actually don't agree with. I think there are like, because I've had really meaningful conversation with comrades around this issue. Because I said like, because they also mentioned how the revolution is going to knock us down a peg in terms of like our lived reality, which is a suggestion because we get so much. But I would argue we would get, I don't agree with that framing, but I also don't think that's accurate. I was telling a comrade, because we were disagreeing on this a while ago, and they're very, very, very smart. But I was like, well, a person, because we live near a Wendy's, and around the way, like, you know, we don't go to Wendy's as much, but we went there and it was, I don't know, we were desperate. But there are workers in Wendy's who got nothing. They just got burns on their hands to prove what the first world living is like. They got burns on their hand. Maybe they live in our building. They can walk over, thankfully. But in my mind, they're not gaining a lot from this abundance yet. I mean, they might gain it in terms of like fruits in the supermarket, which is another conversation to happen, that like in terms of the trail of industry, like, yes, we always get what we need because we take from everyone else. That is going to change. But I still think there'll be like a net positive, even in the immediate sense of finally getting healthcare, finally getting housing, and finally controlling that Wendy's and possibly turning into something else. So that's where I felt a little bit of like the consternation and some like interesting contradiction in that book. So I didn't,
Yeah.
but I get excited by that passage because I'm like, this is so much already tucked into that paragraph.
And what they probably were talking about, and what I would have, and this is what I would have liked them to do. So I see the comment here about, she said, what are we discussing? This lady again, abandoned Assad and Matulu. So, and this is what I would have liked her to clarify. Or for Grace and James to clarify. So when they make the point that people need to stop elevating, quote, rapists and muggers to the status of political prisoners, I'm sure they were talking about Eldridge Cleaver.
That's what I was thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
But one, I think that it would have been great for them to distinguish between what they thought of him and what they would have thought of a Leonard Peltier or Sundiata Acoli or Assata Shakur or somebody like that. And then I would have also liked for them to make room for, and maybe this is, it would have been too early in when they wrote this, but eventually for room to be made for discussions of people who are politicized post incarceration. So and then are then punished for such. And I think that would have been helpful. So they're not saying in the book aggressively abandon Assata and Mutulu. No. They're just saying they just don't talk about Assata and Mutulu, and then only bring up political prisoners in this disparaging way, which is where I do disagree with what they were doing. And I do ultimately think it to a certain extent undermines what I do think is a very valuable contribution to what should be a valuable contribution to people in struggle, because as you pointed out, their analysis of Russia, Vietnam, China, and Guinea-Bissau is very important, and I think what they've done here is very important. So even with the disagreements, I'm I just am very appreciative of what they did here, and again for you suggesting that we read it for this project, because I do think, as I suggested in the title, and that this is the only way to approach an understanding of Black and Asian economics, at least as an initial frame. Like these other ones of Black people do what Asians did is not helpful. But anyway, so I have more notes and things to highlight that we can talk about, but let me turn it back over to you for some of yours or something else you wanted to.
No, I think just like the fact is the book is a really great distillation of some history tied with theory and philosophy. It is extremely interesting, and like I said, they definitely are very Maoist leaning by far. They really think that Mao was very correct in leading the I didn't even know there was a first attempt at a cultural revolution while they were still being, under Japanese imperialism, which itself was like, and they're very forward with some of the failures too. They said that in some instances, Mao's policies failed, like the Great Leap Forward, and how he was replaced, but then they also argue like how he learned from these things. So a couple of the highlights I want to say, which I think are actually still very valid and missing from some of the discourses that I'm involved in, even on the ground sometimes. And I'm the editorial. I'm part of the editorial board. I'm the managing editor of Socialist Forum, which is a DSA publication. And I do like writing and reading, and I'm part of the DSA. Fortunately, unfortunately, because I see a lot of it. So I'm never taking it personally. Sometimes I just bump up in the chats and I'm like, oh yeah, that sucks. Cause I something like just want to say like DSA, unfortunately, I think gets lumped in a lot with AOC, but there's a lot of different things going on. But nonetheless, they are those of us who are Marxist-Leninists in it. And some of the things that we talk about is kind of what James and Grace Lee talk about, which is the real need for knowledge, for consciousness, for a vanguard. They repeatedly talk about organization many times. I think in the Russian Revolution, they talk about how Lenin had a party and the party became sort of a conveyor belt, they said, of knowledge production and people production. And with Ho Chi Minh, one of the things that was so interesting to me again, and same thing with Amilcar Cabral, who is a legend, like literally, like I can't even, I don't know, like one of the smartest human beings who ever lived. Like both of them didn't just leap into armed struggle either. Like you were saying, patience, revolutionary strategy, revolutionary learning. Because so like with the Amilcar Cabral situation, the PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau, which was controlled under Portuguese fascism, which was backed by NATO, because NATO is about freedom. They did try the peaceful approach in the mid 50s, and they were gunned down. And then after that, Cabral, who did train to be an engineer in Portugal, one of the few Africans who were brought there on purpose, he did still work for the Portuguese, but it was intentional to go out into the countryside and to see how people lived. So that was his intention. So again, there's a lot of like planning and plotting and scheming and designing. And then I think there was at least 2 to 3 years of then being in the countryside post the crackdown in the city of Conakry. And they just spent time there, and then they started to level up. But the other thing I really loved was that she kept emphasizing also the battle and the dialectics between short-term gain and long-term gain. Because they kept talking about what separates us from the liberals and maybe some other leftists is not so much, we might share similar immediate gains, like we all want wages to go up and things like, which also they kind of criticize, but we'll get into, but wages to go up, things to strengthen. But I think the story for us versus them, and this is why this is the only way for economics to be working, is that we will always understand the long-term game is always about replacing it's about building the internal to build the stronger external to fight over and complete the revolution. It's never just about winning the wages now. The winning the wages now is to build more rapport and support for the final fight. And that's what they did.
She says, or they said something on page 33 that I thought I would like to think speaks to my and our mission here in delineating, I think, the point you're raising here between liberals and revolutionaries. They write, such people, Lenin said, profess to lead the masses, but actually they lag way behind them. They have not accepted the responsibility of revolutionary leadership, which is not just to sympathize with the masses over their wrongs or encourage them in their militancy. That is what the liberal does. Revolutionary leadership, as distinct from liberal leadership, has the duty to help the masses understand what their political goals must be if they are going to achieve any fundamental solution to their problems. And when I saw that line, I admit I got very self-centered and thought,
now listen,
because and that is exactly what I thought of, not as a high-minded revolution, but what I thought of as the work that I and we are trying to do around here, is to say, we may not have every specific so-called solutionary, if that's even a word, solutionary step to take, but we are trying to clarify what the political goals are. And the political goals, at minimum, are a wild, radical redistribution of wealth, goods, and resources. And then, as Grace is arguing, and I would agree, some sort of elevated design of the very structures and institutions that govern our lives. So I absolutely, so yeah, absolutely. Like it's easy for the liberal to run out here and say, start a small business, circulate the dollar, vote for Gavin Newsom. That's the, but no, I think there does need to be another category of folks, however if we want to call it revolutionary or not, that is saying, no, let's be clear, because what is the end result of that? What is the end result? The end result of a black business community is a black bourgeoisie. The end result of voting for a Democrat is, at best, and I'm seeing it happen all over the place, as I predicted, at best, that we hearken back to the days. Did you see Obama get interviewed the other day on Colbert with Stephen Colbert? I saw it clipped. And it's like, and he's getting these ovations for saying things, you know, like we got to get back control of the, you know, the way things were, of the control of the government. And we got to get back to a time when, you know, like when I was president, like, and I'm sitting there saying, my guy, you were over here warmongering and police investing and blah, 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 and no insurance given, you know, and, but because the liberal call was, we got to get a black president elected, we got to stop the lesser of two evils, we got to, the clarity of the goal is lost, and then we get stuck on what sounds great and gets applause lines when you stand up and say, we have $1 trillion in buying power, and do what the Asians and the Jews do. Like, you get everybody, oh. And then I see what I see is the Donut King Project trying to do is to say, can we clarify what these political goals are before we start cheerleading a little bit? Can we reflect on some of these histories and the details of these conditions and how people end up where they are in relationship to society and the economy, and then come up with some more radical, you know, that's so I just wanted to.
Well, also I just know he stuttered when he tried to talk about Palestine. Like recently, he stuttered in some questioning. He was like, "Oh, there's lots of things that happen everywhere."
Look, I don't want to go too much with the time, but I'll at least pull up one quick example here.
Go for it.
Because it's just so disturbing to me. And I am triggered by the Obama claims, by the way. So let's just take this example here.
I followed, even though they weren't law. And I want us, we're going to have to do some work to return to this basic norm, and we probably now have to codify it.
So that right there, that right there, look, for the sake of time, I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to go. I'll go down a multi-hour rabbit hole with this, and I don't want to drag it. But that line right there, to me, says it all. My guy, you were president for 8 years. For the first 2 years of your first term, you had a Democratic majority in both houses and the whole world supporting you. To sit here now, decades after the fact, and talk about we had it good and just probably should have codified it. What? So you acknowledge that all the little bullshit gains that you offered couldn't even be protected and could be easily reversed? You acknowledge that you didn't institutionalize one good thing to help humanity, never mind even just black people. So like this whole thing of, and then we want to get back to something like shit was great in 2008. Like white phosphorus wasn't getting dropped on Palestinians while he was getting inaugurated. You know, come on, man. Like that again, I'm not trying to act like we don't recognize how bad it is now. Trump is a mess. I get it. But that kind of rebranding is super irritating to me. And then people would promote that as if having voted for him was some sort of solution to the problems that existed then or now. It's crazy. So yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just couple of things too. It's like, I was curious, is he promoting a book? Because he's doing a lot more interviews, or is he just being out there, like you'd say, to be the controller?
I honestly, I don't know. He may be promoting a book. He may have I don't know the state of he and
Netflix.
his wife, the Netflix deal. Maybe they have some movies coming out, or maybe it is just to can we save the party type of thing.
Yeah. Because I'm wondering about that, because he's been out here now recently, and I think the New Yorker, I'm planning to read it if I can get a free access to it, but there's a New Yorker piece that profiles him because he's apparently very popular. But the thing about him that's also so funny, well, a couple of things too that I loved what we were critiquing there, and that clip was perfect. It was enough for me, my heart too, because I don't want to, like it'll explode. Like I have a lot of issues with stress these days, and so I'm being told not to stress too much.
His library, Idle Gray
Ugh.
is saying. Oh wow.
Oh yeah, no, that's right. That's what's
Is
going
that
on.
what he's doing? He's
Yes,
got a
it's coming.
library.
It's coming out, the Obama Foundation Library. So he's, yeah, I forgot about. Thank you. I was thinking, like, what is going on? Like, why is he referencing? Because it usually comes out to, to dig into some of the progressives. Usually like, oh, we should be, in his own, stupid progressive-ish way. But the thing that's so funny too about this book and what we're doing is, yeah, I know he got the Nobel Peace Prize. And I think F.W. de Klerk did too with Mandela. So
But remember, they gave it to him before. They said
before he did
remember
anything. Yeah,
They
it was a
said
hopeful
we
one.
hope you will earn it.
I mean, hope you don't do shit. And he's like, I feel it in my heart. And he killed like an entire group of people in a wedding. So it's like, whatever. So the Nobel Peace Prize.
And a kid. And kids too.
And a kid. Yeah, who cares? So, I mean, the thing about the the thing about this is that, so the reason why this book is so cool is because even though there's a lot of like interesting things about it that we can disagree with, it's funny, like when certain people say black, brown, white, non-Asian brown people who say do what the Asians did, it's never this stuff. Like, the joke is like, do what the Asians did, so then do the revolution. Because she's citing two big ones that happened back to back. And she's citing like how they managed to inspire the third world too in their own way. So I find that's what I mean by recapturing and recovering that Asian American pan ethnic. There is one. So like, just do a revolution.
My bad. I've been bad all day with it. I'm sorry. There's one more thing that I had been saving about Obama that I just want to play real quick. I'm sorry. Damn it. I'm terrible. But so one of the channels that I do admit to watching without ever subscribing or liking, I do watch these tier 1 special forces podcasts, where usually I'm watching because they're exposing someone in their spaces who lied about what they said they used to do, or they're saying that some movie is some lie or whatever. I just want to play you this very quick clip in this discussion from a recent episode where they were talking about the Osama bin Laden raid with one of the SEAL Team 6 leaders on that raid. And I'm watching this because this podcast is often involved in exposing the more popular guy who has been claiming that he killed bin Laden, and they're always criticizing.
Is this a guy who goes off and does, like, wasn't he speaking at the USA baseball dugout, like, inspirationally for the
This guy is probably not, this is not the guy that I think you're thinking about.
But they're talking about that guy.
They're talking about,
that's
and
what
I think
mean.
Tim Kennedy is his name. I think that's the guy.
It's just crazy because he's in there and he's just giving a speech about killing bin Laden, but also no one has any like charisma in that room, so they're just sitting there like, oh yeah, we're gonna play baseball. It's like, what
exactly? And then meanwhile you see the Latin American teams that won. They're on there partying and having fun.
And even the South Korea or the Japanese player, I forgot his name. Sohei, like he's like wearing a hat, like a sombrero and shit, and having fun. And then they're like, "Oh, we killed somebody in the face." So it's like,
so like, and another time I would like to talk more about these podcasts because I actually think that there's political value to listening to them. But that's not what I'm admitting. I'm watching for petty reasons. But this little exchange came up, and I just want you to, I think I have a cue to the right moment here. So just listen to this right here.
The thing is to get their pilots.
So they're talking about, so he's been telling the story, the one being interviewed, not the one on screen here, is he's been telling the story of the raid to kill bin Laden. And he's been going through the whole thing, and they're talking now about the part where they're leaving. And they're worried about, they've killed him, they got the body, they're flying away, and they're still worried about getting out, and that's getting away to freedom and safety and back to base or whatever. And this is and they're talking about the support that Obama gave to the raid.
Killed, and their F-16s knocked out of the sky for doing something they had every right to do, just to protect you guys. That's a ballsy move by the president. It's the right call, but it's not as cut and dry as I think some people look at it or think when you look at like holistically.
I couldn't agree more.
I don't know how many times
I think credits due, because and we had heard about how the Pakistanis had F-16s, and how, we were worried, of course, there's anti-aircraft, all this stuff, but we were worried about that, especially on the way back. And the president asked us, well, what do we have in case they launch their F-16s to go after our helicopters?
Talking about Obama.
And we didn't have an answer. And I believe because we wanted to make sure the mission that was going to escalate things.
Yeah.
And the president said, what kind of airplane, what do we have? And I think it was F-15s.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to make sure we have as many F-15s. I don't care. Like if Pakistani F-16s come after our guys in Pakistan, then we're going to protect our guys. So I just kind of want to, that's maybe a little known thing, but
more credit where credit's.
So my point there is that they're usually, when Obama or a Democrat comes up, they're usually talking bad about him. And, it's always that thing, the Democrats always prevent us from winning wars and fighting and all this other kind of stuff. But here they're saying no. And they're talking about, they're even going so far as to say Pakistan had a right legally to defend itself. You're flying into their territory, conducting this raid without their permission. And then they're saying, no. Obama is even to be given more credit, because not only did he greenlight the raid, but he's saying no, because usually they said a president would greenlight the raid, but not the protection. So it's like, you can go, but if you can't get back out, that's on you. And now he's saying, not only we're going to protect you, but we will bring all of the Air Force and shoot down all of their jets if they try to attack your helicopters on your way out from killing bin Laden. So I just as, for me, it was just another reminder, like, this guy that was supposed to be this superhero for the Black and progressive world is getting credit from oh my God. And that guy's sitting there looking like a little goofy Opie is a psychopathic murder. I'm just playing. Although I don't know, I'm playing. But that's another reason I think it's fascinating. That guy that you think is just
crazy.
sitting there looking like a goofy little white boy is ready to slice and dice you up.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, that was so sorry about that.
No.
I
would not. Well, as the first time I ever, their set is crazy. I gotta say that set is really insisting on itself, like really trying to say we're dudes and we love camo and we have like you have a flag. Do you need an eagle in front of it too? Like I didn't understand that. It's crazy. I was more fascinated about how they dress, and the guy's like, yeah. And the thing about Obama too, it's so fascinating to me, is this is a thing about some liberals in power. They show more concern about these insane people proving to them that they're good than they do people who otherwise really need their support. Because again, the thing that makes me most upset is the Palestinian question, which has been going on for 70 plus years. But obviously, like you just said, I think it was in 2014 maybe, when they were mowing the lawn then, and Obama gave his little call saying, please don't do that. It's not great, but he wasn't doing anything else and just allowing this fake country. That's what Israel is. It's fake. I know countries are fake, but they're very fake. They're trying to do so many things at once. The settler of Israel is a European. They go and then they prove it by leaving to Europe, to where they came, right? So they go to Israel, this fake place. It's Palestine, actually. They take over land. They act like the victim. They drop phosphorus on people who have every right to fight back. And Obama's doing what? Oh, please don't do it. It's like, okay, you have the chutzpah to somehow tell young people in Ferguson to get their shit together and then give us advice, and then have these men also congratulate you. If I ever get close to power, I would do everything in my ability to not have these men congratulate me. Like, I don't mind them with their psycho sets not liking me. It's crazy. Like, surrounded by, all they can think of is being attacked and attacking. And even like you said, the Pakistani, I have no love for the Pakistani military, because they are hand and foot with the US usually. Like, they are actually very like comprador elites, like same out with India, and we can briefly talk about that. But like, the point is, still, yeah, you're going into their territory. I mean, bin Laden, I would prefer a communist take him out, because he was an anti-communist first, but you're going in there. And also, a lot of the details are so random. Like, they dumped his body in the ocean. It's like, why? And it's like very suspicious.
First of all, they claimed that they were doing it to honor his Muslim tradition.
What does that mean? Like, just not even
first of all, I didn't know that was a Muslim tradition.
Oh, second of all, we know in the ocean.
Yeah, to be dropped in the ocean in a white wrapped,
garb.
body.
Yeah.
and then to claim that you're doing it to honor him, I'm just like, well, that's
bizarre.
what kind of nonsense are you?
That's nonsense.
That's why I'm like,
Yeah.
whenever the conspiracy people are like, he's still alive and he's in a what, I'm like, yeah, I mean,
but I have to be honest with you, a lot of suspicious things went down. It was and also they ruined the efforts for Vital Medical because a lot of so they used, I think, and then we can get back to but they used the thing that a lot of Pakistani villagers were suspicious about. So a lot of Pakistanis, I think a lot of the NGOs are American led, and they do like with services having to do with not antibiotics, vaccines, right? They want to give people vaccines. I think they used one of these projects to get close to that compound, which effed up that NGO as well. That's diabolical. Like, you're doing that. Why?
One other thing, just in terms of the stories and the conspiracies that is interesting to me when you hear them tell these stories, like this guy on that interview, he's there on the raid, but they don't actually see the killing of bin Laden. They don't actually even see the body. Like because the way, and I've watched way too many of these things, so I know I'm almost embarrassed. It's almost embarrassing, but the various members on the team are in different parts of the compound and doing different things, and the amount of people who actually go up the steps to the third floor to commit the killing of that they allege happened is only like a handful of people. And then they even acknowledge they don't even know who the person is behind them, so they'll feel their teammate touch their shoulder to tell them to go ahead, but they don't know which one it is. So they don't. So that's why the one guy who's claiming to be the one who killed him, other people on the mission, they can't really confirm or deny it because they're like, I wasn't, like the guy in that interview there wasn't there. He didn't see it. He was on the raid. He flew in on the helicopters. He says he was actually leaning on the covered body of bin Laden as they were flying out. But I noticed that he said it's a covered body. And he's just sort of laying on it because they're quickly evacuating on the remaining working helicopters because they lost one that crashed. So they're all just sort of stuffed in this other helicopter. He's just laying. Who knows what body's in there? So my point is, it's just fascinating. And then there are other reasons why I watch these that I'll come back and talk about another time that are actually, I think, relevant to what we talk about here. But I just think that part, and then again, just for our conversation here, this whole thing of even going back to the Baraka Boggs exchange, this whole thing of by extension from what Baraka was advocating in Newark, that's what he ended up advocating at the presidential level in his argument, even with me, little me, on my radio show back then about supporting Obama. And I was like, I can't. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And he went into this whole thing about how I just don't understand history and why it's important to understand this, that, and the third, and why we have to support Obama, and then why da. And then again, all we get is AFRICOM air support for killing bin Laden and some bullshit non-healthcare plan. Insufficient, at least, healthcare plan.
The one
that by the way, he didn't even codify to the point where we wouldn't need the alleged actions of Luigi to have my healthcare company continue to cover the anesthesia that they said they were going to, prior to that killing, stop covering.
Right.
So it's like, I'm like,
but Jared, the thing is, what you don't understand, and what I think a lot of us understand, is that you get change when you take time, right? You take a lot of time. So maybe in 100 years, you can finally get the surgery you need. And when you're 168, you made it, you can finally do it painlessly. So I think that's progress. And by then you might have 5 specials from Obama, or maybe 5. This man writes so many memoirs about, we could go, he every book he's written is about him. Like I like, he has a trilogy, I think, coming out about him. I'm just like, why are you writing about yourself this many times? Like, I don't even feel confident writing about my life one time. And he wrote like Dreams from My Father, which was a good book. Then he wrote the Senate book. Then he wrote a couple of other books where he also admits to being in these leftist circles only because he wanted to hook up with women. So it's like, this
and
dude
then he said, I disagreed. I think, was it in Dreams or one of them books? He said, I saw Stokely Carmichael speak, and I was like, this is old. This is some bullshit.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
This doesn't even make any sense. So you should elect me, and I'll do Black Revolution correctly.
But can I read a section really quick?
Please,
Yeah.
please.
I
Let's
don't
come
know
back.
all this connects, but I am also fascinated. Now you've kind of introduced me to a world that I think my partner would be very disturbed by. So I'm going to take a look. I was like, what is a tier 1 pod? I thought you meant like there's like a best of podcast. I didn't
Oh
realize
no! Tier 1 is the elite of the special forces. So the host is he's a former Green Beret and Delta. I think. Well, he's Delta Force.
Oh,
I don't know if he was Green Beret or Ranger to get there, but he's Delta Force. So he's that's tier 1. Navy SEALs are tier 1.
I feel
and
safe.
then
I felt safe watching it.
You should.
Yeah. I was like, this man's gonna protect me. He's not.
He
gonna,
is absolutely gonna.
He's not gonna
you.
like look in a crowd and be like, "Oh, you're the problem." I can feel him being a protector.
No, he's going to protect you from yourself and save you from your own resources and your own agency and sovereignty, and maybe your life. He might save you from your own life.
He'll save my body from my ghost soul. Like, I'll just be saying,
this life that's inhibiting you, Sudip. Let me help you take.
You have so many bills, and I just like I'm like the floating. I just look over my body, like, yeah. Thank you, Tier 1 podcast. I didn't need this, and I just float away. That's called hope and change, I guess. There's one thing. But a couple of things are interesting. What you mentioned is true. Like the liberal comes back, the liberal, so-called liberal too, because there's some liberalisms that have changed like amazingly. It's gone worse, right? There's really nothing behind their project at all, other than the rhetoric and other than the smiles and other than the mythology of a norm, right? So in some ways, the only thing I agree with Barack, or frankly, is the fact, yes, I do think one could argue that Black Power, a certain kind, didn't do enough to talk about the infrastructure with Kenneth Gibson and then others. But to be honest, Cory Booker himself is also a reflection of the degeneration of the liberal class. Like you go from certain people who are able to play the game and be like, oh, we're not communists and we don't like them, but you can get some welfare, which is great. This is level up. Now Cory Booker offers you what? A book called Stand? And then telling us hopeful quotes in his own like weird podcasting world about like believe in yourself. I don't want that. Nobody wants that. Even the liberals of back in the day were like, this is not enough. But I also want to say this is why internationalism is so important. They're saying that because the Soviet Union, China under Mao, Vietnam, they existed. So there's a pressure point. But I wanted to connect back to what you're saying about the liberal narrative. It only succeeds when also we don't do enough job. I'm not saying you and I, but when a collective we doesn't do enough to attend to those stupid arguments and like the thing they're talking about this book, propagandize and confront ideologically with people. Like the whole book is about ideas too. They're not saying wait for things necessarily. They're saying Ho Chi Minh, Mao, Lenin, they were always in the practice of getting their thoughts out and writing and reading and exploring those ideas. And there's like and doing that through the party lens. So they're very disciplinary. I think at one point she mentioned how Lenin said, we shouldn't have stragglers in the party. They should be committed, dues paying members. Like there are certain points here that we just don't do enough of. We just don't. Like I'm in the DSA. A lot of people in DSA still are kind of like meh about asking people to pay their dues. And I'm always like, listen, if we're going to be a group or not, you got to be more forward with it. We need to create a sort of identification with the party or the group. But I wanted to read something on page 57 because she sums it up with Mao, and she says, without the party, Mao would have had no cadre, and they connected to framework for the process of proposing, discussion, polarization, and choice between opposing roads. In other words, without the party, the world today would not have Mao's voluminous writings, which are actually party documents for party discussion, party debate, party conferences, party schools, at critical moments in the development of the struggle when differences or contradictions were emerging. And also, he gave a lot of speeches at these cool named schools that they just made up, right? He gave a speech about how to reunify with the Kuomintang after they beat communists, and communists were a bit too excited to see them at one point in some region. And it was like the anti-Japanese imperial school. So all I'm saying is that throughout this book is this very deep connection of intellectualism, which I want to separate from academiaism. Because I think people often view those as the same thing, right? They think intellectualism is the academic, but that's not true. And I think what they're saying is, everyone's capable of ideas. This is actually a much more honest and respectful look of the average person. Because there are some people on the left and liberals who are like, people don't have time to read. People can't think about the same things. They say that in a sense, but they also say, did you give them a chance to? Did you argue with them? Did you confront them? Did you challenge them? Did you build a party so they can be part of these discussions? Like, it's going to be awkward. You're sitting there. I've gotten lost in arguments. Like, there's certain things about Robert's rules and things like that. I don't even know what's going on half the time. So I'm just like, you know what I mean? And I'm like so-called educated, but I'm just saying, like, the point is they kept referring to the intellectualism different from the academiaism that actually infects us sometimes. So I think that was something that I really wanted to reflect, because Mao was smart. Ho Chi Minh was incredible. He went on this whole journey across America and Harlem and France. I think he co-founded the French Communist Party. Then he dipped to Indochina to fight the French. It's really incredible what a lot of these men and women had to do back in the day.
Yeah, it was the Anti-Japanese Political and Military Academy in Yenin, Yoryenan. I thought that's pretty dope. No, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I do want to just sort of reiterate to folks in the audience that we can't do the book justice in this one conversation. That I do have to end by 12:30. By the way, I've been given a little bit of an extension here, but so I encourage people to check this out, and especially, if you're like me and you're under familiar with some of the details of these various revolutions, the Chinese, the Russian, the Vietnamese, Guinea-Bissau, and even the attempt here in the United States. This book is a good overview, even if you don't fully agree with every single thing that they're saying. I think it's very helpful and a very good summary of these struggles, and with some important details about the inner workings of these struggles and how people, how leaders and parties and movements looked to build themselves and convey themselves and defend themselves. So yeah. And so, like, for instance, I don't think maybe I might have known at one point and don't remember, but I certainly didn't remember, that whole debate about Stalin counseling Chiang Kai-shek, and then that counseling leading or being the debate was to what extent that counseling failed and led to Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang, and it's what was it, 1927, the massacres and all of that. And then, so anyway, I just thought that was interesting. And then, so there's even a little bit in the Boggs analysis of a defense of Stalin in saying that Mao at least said this was more a failing of the Chinese application of the ideas than any of the counseling that they were getting from the Russian Revolution, but also importantly pointing out that China, and Mao in particular, was not trying to do, nor should they have tried to do, what Russia did, nor should anyone try to do what Russia did. It's the point is to take certain guiding principles and ideas and then apply them to the specifics. And I am glad I highlighted the same thing, or underlined the same thing about the cadre point that you raised there, and the importance of, as I understood it, there being a party to work within. And that what we read of from Mao was his attempts to build and organize and clarify the party that would be necessary, and without which we would not know of his work. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, the book is like with James and Grace Lee, like, it's very clear that they're Maoists, but they also refer to Stalin in a very measured way. They do call the Russian, like, they give Stalin credit for helping develop Russia into a world power, but they also say something that was quite honest about even Russia to an extent, and also other places in America, which is economic development without political development can lead to political dissatisfaction and backwardness. I just liked how they kept saying that about the US too. They kept saying the economic development or technological development strips away. It just sort of outpaces what political development needs to happen. And that's the thing, like you're saying about Russia and China. So Mao himself, according to them and according to what he wrote, he identified very quickly after they were, so I guess in 26, the nationalists were then this is when the unity started to fragment prior to Japan really taking hold and invading everything about China, and the Kuomintang was beginning to really become dependent on foreign support. They said like Western support and also
U.S. in
landlords.
particular, they said,
Yeah, yep, for a long time. And so the communists in China failed to see that, and Stalin himself was a bit idealist actually in not understanding this. And this is what Mao understood a little bit, luckily too late though, because he wasn't murdered, but a lot of communists were killed. And it's because a lot of the communists then in China did think they would do the same thing with Russia, because when Russia had its revolution, it was twofold. There were the 1905 revolution, which created a parliament that was kind of fake. Very obviously, we don't even know what that's like as a country that lives with democracy. We don't know what it's like to live under a fake Congress. It's just like anyway, yeah. So they lived under a fake Congress.
Lucky for us.
Lucky for us, we don't have anything to connect to that. So, oh, war with Iran. Oh, the Epstein class waging war. Totally. They asked us about
Israel occupying Palestine that she talks about, that they talk about in the book.
Yeah.
Good thing that doesn't.
Yeah, losing jobs. That's what I voted for. I was saying to myself, you know what the Palestinians should do when they're about to speak? Let me know that they're not deeply, deeply anti-Semitic first, and then they can talk about all the kids being hit in the head with bullets. But I voted for that, so I'm complete control of Congress. Like the 38% who only like the Iran war. That's just that's a lie. So
it's false news.
It's false news. It's tier 1 podcast news. Which sorry, I didn't mean to time it while here.
tier 1 podcast news.
we should have a podcast like that where we just do a parody. Like you're in like gear. You should wear the dress shirt, but like it's clearly bulging because you have like 2 layers of a what's the word, bodyguard gear. It's gonna be just us doing that. But let me see. Oh yeah, so
see, I'm already almost there.
Oh my god! Oh yeah, you were. I forgot about that.
Right. Yeah. I could break out all my gear.
You should start every sentence saying "as a veteran," and then
as a veteran,
yes.
As a veteran, we need socialism.
Right, you should do that. That'd be a great. One day we just lead into that. As a veteran, what do you think? And I'm like, and you're like, as a veteran, I think we should have a complete redistribution of all land and resources.
And I can and at least with the green screen, I can get some.
A whole unit.
Get some eagles and some flags.
You got to make them fly and do the hawk noise once in a while, and I'll have a button whenever you're like, right? Jared's Eagles. Like it's like a point of the show where you have let loose the eagles.
Raoul's got it. As a veteran and a Jew.
Oh, right,
we need socialism and an end to Israeli occupation.
Right. Oh my god.
So that will go over well.
Right. But actually the podcasting thing lends itself to the idea of how do we propose intellectual change in a society where we yet don't have a party. That's a really important, because the book also speaks to the things that you and I really care about, which is because our project is focusing on the podcasting world, the podcasting world,
mulatto veteran Jew,
and also the movie world, right? Like we keep suggesting that there's certain tropes out there, even if academia has caught up. The ideas out there that are surrounding like the Donut King. I mean, Donut King was a documentary with HBO or something. Like they weren't nobody. Like it wasn't some random thing. So with this book, it's important. Like they're talking about the cultural with the material, the superstructure, and whatever. So it's like the book mentions that, and they also clearly say that all the greatest revolutionaries take that really, really important. Like they say they basically are saying like the revolutionaries don't let bad ideas just fly. They actually try to shoot them down. Like they do try to get them down. And that's why they were constantly discussing things. Like there's a certain value set in this book that's quite amazing to me. But it also shows, sadly, the difference between some of our left, not to be like an old person myself, but some of our left, and then the rest of the world. Because even with the Palestinian cause, the Palestinians have a long history of intellectualism. Like a lot of their number 1 authors, like Ghassan Kanafani, was a novelist and a poet and everything else, and the co-founder of the PFLP. So that was something I was also gravitating toward as why to read this, because we are talking about a cultural change too.
Yeah, and again, this is a really good point. I mean, one of the threads through the book is again that point about the revolutionary patience and the building with the people, the importance of study. They reference that kind of repeatedly throughout the book. Constant discussion, constant study, constant education, and development of alternative institutional frameworks for politics, housing, healthcare, etc. So I do really appreciate that. And in a couple of points, I did, write in the margins, reference again to my own buying power work, and then even our own, again, back to the Donut King project. Just in terms, for instance, on page 83 in the discussion of the liberation of Guinea. Although how are they spelling this here? That the spelling is for some reason different from me, new to me. Anyway, they write at the bottom, to some readers, all of these concepts may seem elementary. That is basically the need to convey ideologically to people the need for struggle. But they are repugnant to many people and much more difficult to hold fast to than most people realize. That is because remnants of other ideas or myths by which men and women have lived in the past persist in most of us. For example, the myth of a God who is the guarantor of a day of reckoning when the oppressors will be destroyed or will destroy themselves is a very prevalent myth, particularly among the uneducated masses, because they don't know any better and because they have no other basis for hope. As many people know, it is also a very dangerous myth because it creates the illusion that the future is in God's hands and therefore it is unnecessary or futile for mortals to struggle. And I admit, I have to be honest. When I read that again, I was thinking, this is my point about the mythology around Black capitalism and buying power and all of this other kind of stuff. But I also do agree with what she's saying about religion, and I do also agree, despite how condescending it sounds, about it being related to a lack of education or I should say a form of imposed mal-education or bad education. Miseducation. But I do. I think I just lost my train. Oh, and by the way, in that tier 1 podcast, to the point that she ends with there, that they end with there. I keep saying Grace, but I know James was involved at some point. In that tier 1 podcast, at one point, they end up talking about this. They actually, because they're all good Christian soldiers, they say in kind of cryptic language, they're saying, look, we know how this all ends up. We know that he is going to return and fix all of this. But in the interim, we do feel compelled to do all that we can to make the world as safe and blah, 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 and free as possible. In other words, they were acknowledging the existence, and to what extent and to how deep it runs, I can't be sure, but they're acknowledging among the tier 1 operators who have, by the way, you have to have at least a college education to get there. They're all college educated, well-trained, top tier 1 operators, but they're over there believing, no, man, Jesus is on his way. The day is near. And so if we got to go in, and my point though is kind of what she said, like, so they're saying, in the interim, we'll go out here and assassinate and kidnap and kill and blow up and do all these things as necessary, even though we believe that at the end of the day, none of it really matters because we're all doomed and Jesus is, he's going to have to come back here and correct all this anyway. And on the left, it's like our version. I do believe there is a version of that on the sort of the good side, that is, where even among the radical left, I think more than people would be willing to admit, although I'm wildly speculating, admittedly here, that I do believe people do have a certain level of belief that in the end, the good Lord, whichever one they're praying to, is going to come down here and fix it all, or we're going to be, And then one other quick point to that, on 97, they write, which I thought was interesting because I've never studied at all Confucianism, but they make this point that in comparing Vietnam and China, they make the point, moreover, both countries share a cultural background in Confucianism, a philosophy which has never made the division between politics and ethics, which Christianity render unto Caesar, which is Caesar's, and Machiavelli, who originated the idea of value-free political science, have made so integral to a part of Western thinking. I thought that was interesting, that part of the problem that they're isolating here that of Western thought is that kind of what we were saying about the underlying religious and other forms of mythology. It's kind of saying, look, at the end of the day, we can't be too mad at the rich because it's Caesar. You got to render unto Caesar what Caesar's, as the good book says. And Machiavelli, who's saying, you know, this is value-free political science. And meanwhile, Confucius apparently was saying, no, there is no disunity between ethics and politics, which may be benefiting those struggles, as I think the Boggs are suggesting. So I thought that was interesting.
No, that's great. I think with that, also the line, how they're describing it is kind of the way I'd like for people to describe culture, because they're still being very particular. Like, they're not saying all of Asia, they're saying China and Vietnam, and also they said to a part of Western thought. So I thought that's also very precise still. I just wanted to raise that up because there is a way of talking about these value sets without going all in. And because, you know, usually when they talk about Confucianism, it's a lot of white folks and even sometimes black folks who then say these are the values that make Asians so great. Right, like in terms of values, like Confucius knew how to save money. But I do want to add too, like the Chinese Communist Party have also done a lot of work to, they may believe in the idea of ethics and politics and society and economics all being in one united function, which makes them so powerful in their analysis. Like, you handle the economic to get the political, you handle the social to get to the political. And also she references how the Communist Party were organizing women, for example, in their own crit sessions on the back end in the village to beat the shit out of men who are awful or make them apologize. It was like, but that's very not only forward thinking for the women's side, it helped in recruiting more women, which helped in fighting the Japanese. It helped in exposing women who are peasants to this a new idea of Marxism, Leninism, or Maoism eventually. So it was all part of this really great strategy of helping the society build, but never disassociating one from the other. Like, the whole point was, let's get communists in there to talk to them, other women to women. But the thing that's also interesting about Confucianism, as far as I know, the Communist Party has also done a lot of work in suppressing some parts of it that are very conservative too. You know, like the parts where, like, because it's true that I think even Grace and James reference, until the communist movement happened, a lot of times women who are maybe, I guess peasants too, but women of a certain class were truly brutalized. And they were, like, I think Mao started off as a liberal. I think one of the main reasons why, I read this somewhere, was because his sister wasn't allowed to go to school. So it really offended him. And he actually hated his father, who was like a mini landlord of a type. So again, they're just they do a great blend of the cultural and political, even in how they talk about these issues. Because there's always
again,
this, like,
all of us joined revolution to address initially some conflict in our own personal lives. That's
exactly,
you know, the point is to just recognize it and not let it take over your engagement.
Or recognize it and not let it simmer to that same level, because everything to me is like stages, you know, like I've been racially profiled, but there's tons of black and brown folks who then stop at the level. This is not a diss to them. And the same thing with Obama. I'm not offended by, I mean, I get annoyed, but I'm not offended by certain people who are desperate to get out of whatever the situation is. It's more about the failure of some of the left to not do the work to get them to our side. That's the thing I think she's trying to say. But also in terms of like lived experience, there's a certain ceiling. And even Cabral says this, like he says, Fanon says, like, they all reference this because they're all worried about a certain subset of left thought where it's like, because actually when you said there is a similarity of even the good guys having a view of evangelicals in a way, I immediately thought of spontaneity and lived experience in a sense, like, you know, because they also reference it on 83 where they say the revolutionary struggle now going on in Guinea demonstrates that revolutions are made. They don't just happen by accident or spontaneity. And they keep referring to how American leftists that they know are waiting for that storming of the Bastille moment, where it's just going to break down. And I think that's the one where it's godly, where I have that moment too, where it's like with the George Floyd uprising, which was, in my opinion, going the right way, and then it got co-opted. But nonetheless, there was no other infrastructure around it. You had local BLM chapters trying their best. Then you had the national, I guess, not helping. So you had this problem where locals needed a bigger party for funds and resources and help, and they were doing the work. It was never about the local people, but nonetheless, that's a great example, right? A lot of people thought, including me, this is going to be it. People are finally getting antagonized. People are realizing the military is one with Trump and blah, blah, blah. It didn't happen because of what they say in this book, because there was no party to lift up past the point of the protesting. And then finally repression, right? State repression came in, and they started, like in Philly, they started shooting tear gases into black working class neighborhoods just to warn them. There was no opposition to that. So I think that was a really key concern. That's our God, spontaneity. There's an element where some of us really believe that enough spontaneous uprisings and unrest will dislodge enough of the power structure. But what they're saying is, well, A, that's not true on a power level, but B, what happens afterwards anyway? Because easily things can be, it's an ideological battle too. And that's what happened with Biden. He came in, as a war criminal and just took over that approach. And basically I think there was some data showing that places that had a high rate of protesting voted for the Democrats. This is not like a front on them. It's just showing you that there was no option. No one was introducing a new option, right? So that was kind of what's going to happen. But spontaneity is what I thought of. Yeah.
And that's why I agree with, at least broadly, what the Boggs were saying in terms of building alternative infrastructure.
Right.
We have to build parties, as I'm interpreting it, build other forms of organization that are prepared to deal with moments of uprise or conflict. So look, I only have about 20 minutes left. And look, I'm happy to we could even.
Oh,
why am I muting?
I hear you now.
Yeah, I don't know what that was weird. What I'd like to do, and maybe I'll even just suggest this while we're here. I'd like to maybe even just schedule a follow-up discussion of this, because there's a lot we didn't really get to. And so I'm open to it at least. But I would like to, if we can, turn to a couple of these points at the end of the book that I'm struggling with, because, and I'm admitting it's kind of weird reading this while I'm also rereading Blood in My Eye, because George, if in the way I've oversimplified it in my mind, is that the Boggs are saying we need to have a revolutionary patience. Again, not a liberal one, not some utopian fantasy about the future and the perfect conditions and all of that, which they're rightfully critical of. But Jackson seems to be saying, as I keep interpreting it, especially on this last reread, we need a revolutionary impatience. And at this point, fascism already being here, the goal needs to be to just bust this thing up and make it unworkable, unlivable, unfunctionable, and then we'll figure the rest out from there. And I have to admit, and I'll put this, I submit myself to the revolutionary thought in the audience and in yours and in the community. I admit that I'm increasingly drawn to Jackson's argument. But in reading, I'm just on 258 here at the bottom. They write, and again, they're making an assessment of all these different histories and revolutions, trying to suggest something for the United States in the 20th century. Now we're in the 21st. In the end, they write, each has become an interest group, and they're talking about all these different sectarian parts of the movement. Concerned only with itself. While each may talk about Black power, women power, workers' power, in the final analysis, each is only talking about separation of powers or a piece of the action. None is talking about real power, which involves the reconstruction of the entire society for the benefit of the great majority and for the advancement of humanity. They have each reduced themselves to being a part of and lost They have each reduced themselves to being apart and lost sight of the whole. By evading their responsibility, they have lost both their sense of ethical judgment and the respect for factual truth. In losing these, they have lost some of their own humanity. And then it goes to the section that you read earlier already, that we both read on page 259 in their criticism of third worldism, political prisoners, and nationalism and male chauvinism, et cetera, and so forth. So on the one hand, I guess I'm saying at least what I wanted to. Oh, I'm sorry. Then on page 261, this is the other part I forgot I wanted to add in here. Or starting at the bottom of 260, a revolutionist does not hate the country in which the illegitimate and oppressive system and government continues to rule. So this is again where I started to drift away. Far less does the revolutionist hate the people of the country. On the contrary, a revolutionist loves the country and the people, but hates what some people are doing to the country and to the people. Someone who hates the country and the people becomes a renegade and runs away. Therefore, the important question is not, is the revolutionist for overthrowing the government? Rather, it is, do you believe the present government and the existing institutions of this country serve the need of the people to continue advancing their humanity? U.S. capitalism today is a cancerous growth on the people of the world. Now the American people need to find another way of life, a superior system which will enable human beings to control technology rather than be controlled by technology. And so on. And I don't know. So on the one hand, I can't say that I fully disagree with any of it. I just admit I'm struggling with the suppression of nationalisms and the suggestion that we love the country and the people, just not the way it's currently being run. I'm far from there. I'll just have to admit that I'm not there. If that's the goal, I'm not. That's not where I'm at. But yeah, go ahead.
No. I also underline that too, because I'm very opposite that. Let's just say when it comes to the first part of that, I'm quite miserable here, except for the people I love, right? Like that's the reason why I'm here, is because I grew up here. I love the diversity of the area I'm in, and I love my partner and my family and my parents, and I love doing this. Like this is what gives it life. But this is not the country. This is actually opposite of the country. I think the country would like me to be honest, to die, basically, because I can't produce the same way as I once did. And I think it would like for other people to die, and it's also already killing people. So I agree with you. I think there's parts of the book that do that sort of they're trying to do something quite, I think it's part of the times too, because they are trying to recover, because they have a whole chapter talking about the Puritans and what they failed, right? That's where I started to drift, because I was like, where is this going? Because I was reading it, but that's, how your eyes travel to the third line of everything. I was just
it's like I've read 10 pages, but I don't remember what I've been doing.
I'm glad for the previous version of me for having underlined something, because I don't know what version of me, because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Because I'm reading this, I'm like, all right, I knew this was in here maybe. So like the Puritans came, they were escaping this, and I'm like, the third line, the fourth line, but they're honest. They lead, they are part of this genocidal project. But that's where I feel like with James and Grace Lee, because what I know about their lives is that they would also spend a lot of time with their friends trying to talk. They would have sessions out in maybe not Martha's Vineyard, but something like it out there in the coast, which I think is actually really cute and nice. Like everyone should have time. That's not bourgeois to have a good time, but
to have a pastoral break. Yeah,
it's fine. Like I hate when people are like China proves like China said in the 80s when they were making this transition that helped them survive what the Soviet Union could not. Socialism is not poverty. You're not doing a vow of poverty. Speaking to religion,
right.
To your point,
that's right.
Socialism is not poverty. We're not monks here making a vow of eating beans.
That's right. That's right.
We want a good life. We want abundance. We want a good life. Yeah.
In fact, that's the point. Capitalism proves we can produce the abundance. It's just that you motherfuckers take all of it. Yeah.
The people I hate, to your point, because that's the thing right now with this country. So they're talking about the Pilgrims. They're very forward about it. They talk about slavery. They talk about the slavery. So they're very, very analytical, which I appreciate. But definitely it leads to this moment where I'm like, listen, I know I keep saying this because I feel gaslit. We just had the Epstein report. And you know what I'm saying? Like, what are we talking? This country is Epstein Island. I think Nick Estes or someone else had said like the Epstein Island existed prior to the Epstein, with native people, but
It's an Epstein country.
it's an Epstein. Yes. So it's like, I only get this part what they're talking about. And I do agree in terms of strategy. Obviously, you don't want to lead with, well, actually, no, I disagree. There's a friend of mine who said that they actually lead with how much it's so frustrating to be here and people love it. That there is a segment who like it, like us and other people we know. But yeah, sometimes you don't want to just harp on what you hate. I get the idea of building. Like, you don't want to be like, you hate this, hate. But to be honest with you, and this is what drives me crazy, the Epstein report, why isn't more people on the left, including my beloved DSA, which I'm part of, why aren't we just calling a spade and saying like, listen, this thing is Epstein. This whole unit is a human trafficking enterprise dressed up in hotels and casinos. And when the Super Bowl came to New Jersey, there had to be advertisements telling you how to spot a sex worker who might be trafficked. Like, do we understand that's our society? I think people remember in the Northeast. I think maybe Renee remembers, but that was literally the thing. And that was several years ago when we held it. Like, that's our society. So I do love segments of the people, because that is true. But that line, I just wonder how she would frame it and how James would frame it if they were around now. Because a lot of people actually are tapping into the hate, which is a good sign. Because it's freaking, with the Luigi question, why are we getting denied anesthesia and possibly dying while our taxes are paying for guys to go around on different islands to abuse people? That is what's happening. Like Gulf, the report, I didn't read all of it because it's too mind-numbing, but the Gulf people and the Israelis and the Americans, they were trading women, calling them sandwiches, calling them food. Do you bring women with you? Deepak Chopra with his dumbass being out there talking about hope and change and being a freaking sniveling monster. Like, all of them are doing this while bombing the shit out of a girls' school in Iran. And the Palestinians are also being bombed. So to your point,
Turning around, I mean, just this week, I mean, not that we need one more example of the nonsense, but just this week, they're saying now they want the taxpayers to float $1 billion for the president's ballroom. And it's so they're just really, really playing in our faces with this stuff. Like you can't have health care, you can't have housing, you can't have a job.
He said
but I'm going to spend $1 billion of your dollars on a fucking ballroom.
And he said it at a conference. Didn't he say it? Didn't he say we won't have money for childcare? I didn't mean to cut you, but he literally said that.
Yeah, he said we don't have money for that. And then I mean, there's so much bullshit. But this is why, again, I just have to admit my bias, and then leave it for the people to determine with a grain of salt how they use. But to me, the George Jackson line that I continuously quote about, I didn't hate until I saw that you were all doing this shit intentionally. And I know I didn't get his quote right, but that's the point, that I loved everybody and I want to love everybody. And I want to gratify the mind and the body and the soul and all the stuff that George was talking about. But it's when I saw that you're doing this on purpose. Now I hate. And to me, the hate is if I focus on what I hate, it will allow for me to build with what I would love, because it will prevent me from allowing or being accepting of people replacing what I hate, with something that I can only claim to love, but don't obviously really do. So it's like, no, I don't like whatever produces these outcomes. I don't like it. So stop doing it.
I love that.
And so anyway, that's just, so look, I agree with we
should do that. There's a lot
here. Roge that we should do a part 2, because I actually read this book, and there's a lot more to get to in it. That we didn't, that in part because of me, that I didn't, we didn't get to, and that I think are actually really relevant to our Donut King project, and to maybe even more, certainly with my own, narrow bits of work. So, Sudip, let me just thank you very much. I'm gonna wrap up here on my own here, because I want to do another push for crushing wheelchairs before we get out of here. But I definitely want to thank you very much for suggesting this book. and remind everybody that your Substack, and actually I've read a couple things I'd like to talk with you about that you know.
I saw you liking stuff and I was so happy. Can I just
Well,
really
this morning I just started.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, I
yeah.
haven't read his stuff I was like, I'm
Yeah, yeah.
behind. We're doing a show, and then they're not long. And then so
No.
the you know, the piece about Lenin,
Yeah.
and they're just like great little short reminders of stop getting caught up in this bullshit. It's like kind of
Yeah.
like what I was just saying. So people should
I
check
don't
it
wanna,
out.
before
Yeah.
the crushing.
No,
just
go
really
ahead, go
quickly,
ahead.
I also got a new article, academic piece out that's kind of like about education and ideas and stuff. So I'll share that with you and Renee soon too, to see what you guys think.
Yeah, let's
So that
rap
just
about
came out.
it. Look,
Yeah.
look, my classes are over. It's summertime. I'm not going anywhere.
I still got a great.
So
But I'm
it's gonna
I'm
be-
good with doing
yeah.
a part 2 of this too as well, 100%.
I will email you immediately and we'll start scheduling it, because this has been great and there's more to get to. So thank you very much. You know. All right, everybody. Peace to Sudip. And I just want to say again before I wrap for today, please come out to Crushing Wheelchairs, either in DC or Baltimore. I'm hosting both of the events. If you're not in those two areas, scan this QR code up here and find where other viewings are taking place and other information about the film. It is really a good film. Aside from the politics, it's just a good film. Then on top of it, you get the politics of it being about houselessness, made by people in the houseless community in struggle with obviously allies helping with the production. But it's a truly grassroots guerrilla third cinema film that is beautifully done. So please support it however you can. And if you're in either DC or Baltimore, come on out. All the QR codes will take you to everything you need to. And just thank you very much in advance for that. I appreciate it. Please also check the recent post about Chris Simpson. Again, may he rest in peace. Big supporter of critical thinking around media studies, and his Science of Coercion book should be a must read for anyone interested in the media world that we currently suffer and how we got here. So may he rest in power as well. And thanks again. So thanks again to Sudip. Thanks again to all of you who are here live, and to those who will see and hear this later. Peace to you as well. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but that will have to do. And again, shout out to DJ Spinner and Stevie Wonder. And if you missed that, go back to the beginning and get caught up. And as always, again, thanks everybody. Peace only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say, and as Grace Lee and James Boggs did. And we'll catch you next time.
And what did you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.